Today, we're digging into the fictional 2026 Iran war. And while the fighting might be happening in the Middle East, its shockwaves are being felt literally everywhere. Make no mistake, this isn't just a regional conflict, it's a full-blown global event.
So this is the big question, right? How can a war in one part of the world completely rattle everything, disrupting trade, energy, and even the food that ends up on your table? Well, let's follow the numbers and see how it all connects.
The first and most immediate hit: energy prices. Global crude oil prices have shot up by a staggering 50% since this all kicked off. And that's not some abstract problem for Wall Street, that's a direct hit to your wallet every time you fill up your car or pay your heating bill.
And the human cost, it's just immense. In just the first few weeks, we're talking about an estimated 3.2 million people forced from their homes inside Iran. Millions of lives thrown into chaos, running from violence with absolutely nowhere to go. And this wasn't contained, the crisis spilled right over the border. In neighboring Lebanon, retaliatory strikes have displaced over 1 million more people. It just goes to show you how fast a conflict can explode into a massive, multi-country humanitarian disaster.
So you have to be asking, how on earth did we get here so fast? Well, the jump from simmering tension to all-out war was incredibly quick. Let's rewind a bit and look at the timeline to see how the dominoes fell.
It really started with trouble at home. Huge protests across Iran back in 2025. Then, by early 2026, the last thread of diplomacy just snapped when nuclear talks totally collapsed. That failure was the trigger. The U.S. moved its military into the region in a big way, and on February 28th, the joint U.S.-Israeli offensive kicked off. The whole region was plunged into war.
But here's the thing, this is not your grandfather's war. The main battlefield isn't some physical front line with trenches. Nope, it's the electromagnetic spectrum. It's what experts are now calling a war of signals.
Just think about what that means for a second. This is a war fought with data as much as with firepower. The entire goal is to see everything without being seen, to know exactly where your enemy is while you stay invisible. It's all about blinding your opponent before they can even make a move.
And this comparison really spells it out, doesn't it? Old-school warfare was about taking ground with tanks and soldiers, but this new kind of conflict, it's all about controlling information. You use satellites, advanced radar, and encrypted data to get the upper hand before a single shot is even fired.
This quote just cuts right to the heart of it. In a modern war, knowing the exact coordinates of an enemy ship is way more valuable than the missile you use to sink it. Information isn't just power anymore, it's the ultimate weapon.
And here's where things have really changed. For decades, the US and Israel had this overwhelming tech advantage. But that's not the case anymore. Russia is reportedly feeding Iran intel on US military positions. China is supplying advanced anti-stealth radar, these insane carrier-killer missiles, and even moving Iran's navigation off US GPS and onto its own encrypted network. That long-held technological edge is disappearing fast.
Okay, so let's bring this all back to the big picture. You might be thinking, this is all happening thousands of miles away, why does it matter to me? Well, these power plays are creating huge ripple effects that are impacting everything from energy security to the price of your groceries.
Two of the most basic things we need for modern life, energy and water, are now seriously at risk. And what's wild is how a threat to one immediately creates a threat to the other.
I mean, just look at this chart. These Gulf countries are in one of the driest places on Earth. They depend on desalination plants to make fresh water. We're talking 61% of Qatar's water, 59% for Bahrain, 47% for Kuwait. These plants are now prime targets. A successful hit could trigger a catastrophic water crisis for millions of people. These aren't just factories, they're lifelines.
And it's not just water. The next big shockwave hits global supply chains, and that puts both the economy and our food security in real trouble. And it all comes down to a few critical choke points.
Okay, this is so important to understand. A quarter of the world's oil and a fifth of its natural gas has to pass through this one tiny waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. But it's not just energy. 30% of the world's seaborne urea, that's a key ingredient in the fertilizer we use to grow food, comes from here too. And the main hub for UN aid shipments, 60% of it is now frozen. You disrupt this one spot, and you disrupt energy, food, and aid for the entire planet.
So here's how it all connects in this devastating chain reaction. You start on the left. The energy shocks and shipping problems mean prices for everything go up, and people can't afford as much.
In the middle, you've got the human cost. Millions are displaced, needing help. And then on the right, all of this creates massive political tension. It's a vicious cycle where economic pain creates a humanitarian crisis, which then fuels even more instability.
And the final piece of the puzzle, the whole thing is contagious. This war isn't staying put. It's pouring fuel on all the other fires burning across the Middle East, destabilizing governments, sparking sectarian violence, and threatening to tear apart countries far away from the actual fighting.
So, the big question is, where did this all go from here? What happens next? Well, analysts have basically mapped out 3 possible futures for the next month, and they range from a very tense peace to an absolute catastrophe. So the 3 paths are, first, the major fighting stops, but things are fragile. Second, the conflict just keeps grinding on at its current level. And third, the nightmare scenario, it escalates into a full-blown, multi-front regional war.
Let's start with scenario 1, the quote-unquote best case. And I say that because even if the fighting stops, the damage is already done. Energy prices stay high, hurting everyone's wallets. Millions of people are still displaced, their homes are gone. And the political tensions that started all this, they're still simmering right below the surface. The war might be over, but the crisis is not.
Scenario 2 is just this grim, grinding reality where the conflict drags on. If that happens, you see global inflation, driven by all the supply chain chaos, just hammering people everywhere. The need for humanitarian aid in the region will go through the roof, but international aid budgets will be stretched to their absolute breaking point, unable to keep up. It's a slow burn disaster for the whole world. And then there's scenario 3, the worst case. This is where the conflict explodes. Iran starts targeting international shipping, oil prices go crazy, and it triggers a global recession. Food supplies are threatened. Mass displacement becomes a global crisis that overwhelms every system we have. This isn't just a regional war anymore. It's a global catastrophe that could ignite other conflicts all around the world.
Which leaves us with this one big final thought. After seeing how our energy markets, our supply chains, our aid systems, how everything is woven so tightly together, you have to ask, in a world disconnected, can any major crisis ever really be local? Or is every fire now a global one?